The views expressed here are those of the authors and do not in any way represent the views of Sophia TV.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another edition of Ladies First. I'm joined here by my wonderful panelists, Sada Russell and Saida Sabah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Wanted to discuss the unfortunate subject of Islamophobia. Are Muslims being treated unjustly? One, and how is this affecting our children? And do we feel that there is a conspiracy in the media, in schools, workplaces, etc.? Let's start off with question number one. Do we feel that we are being treated unjustly? Sada?
I think to an extent, maybe I would agree, but you can't help but feel sympathetic to the other side that is kind of... I'm not talking about the hate attacks on the Muslims, like, you know, if someone screams bad words at a hijabi lady or something, but the feeling of anxiety maybe around Muslims, I wouldn't blame someone for feeling the way they do, because they see attacks supposedly from Muslims, so of course they're going to feel wary.
Or grouping us, every Muslim, grouping them together because of the attacks.
Yeah.
Sabah, what do you think? Is there a conspiracy?
To some extent, yes, I think there is.
How? Explain.
I think Islam, it's sort of what was forecasted anyway about the religion coming under attack near the end of times, because obviously we all believe the Dajjal and the coming of, the beast or whatever, and this is going to happen, and Islam will be under attack heavily because it's a plan, and Islamophobia is intentional. It's there to create as much hatred and animosity against this religion. This beautiful religion, because obviously it's the preparation of the Dajjal, so by the time he comes everyone is brainwashed on his side, so if you look at it from that point of view. So yes, I think it's definitely intentional.
Do you feel that we have been, why are we shocked? Do you feel that there's a sense that we've been sitting on our laurels? We had a very nice ride until 9/11 came, even sometime before that, and then now we're in a position where we feel that we have to defend ourselves. Maybe we should have been a bit more integrated, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we do have many apologetics right now, and I don't believe that that's the way forward. I don't think we need to sort of respond in such a way. But I think there's a dire need for education, and that we need to understand how we are to respond to the increase of hate crimes against, especially the fact that Islam is being made responsible as being labelized as a religion that encourages war. And so, and plus a religion of hate. But when in fact we're trying to sort of say that actually, well, the truth is Islam is a religion of peace, and you could go over and over and say this, but it's the narrative where, how do we actually, rather than sort of just say, I mean, when we say it, it almost appears that we're being apologetic by having to keep explaining ourselves. No, this is not us, they don't represent us. But yeah, we can say it, but actually how do we act that out? Like, I think a great example would be actually just, perfecting ourselves in a sense. We can't, in our own mannerisms and our ways of like being patient, not being aggressive in our response, but actually being proud. How do we be proud of being Muslim? Like when when Islam today means terrorism.
How do we? Do we have any examples of why we should be proud of being Muslim? I mean, I just know for myself, I I try and educate myself of what, especially in England, what culturally we have brought in, Muslims have added to the country here. We've been here well before, in the docks in Liverpool, Algerians, Tunisians, Somalians, well before the refugee crisis or whatever they want to call it, and how much we have brought in. And with the children, how do you think this is affecting our youth in any way? The media bias, or if there is a media bias with Muslims, and do they fear that they're being targeted at schools?
Or if you think about the mentality of an adolescent maybe, or a younger child, that their main focus largely is to fit in and to to be the same as everybody else. So if they are constantly pointed at and, you know, they're the at-risk one, they're the one that need to be, you know, prevent or watching, they're the ones that kind of everybody's waiting for that person to mess up, then it puts all their life under a lot of pressure, and it becomes too much for an adult to deal with, let alone for an adolescent to deal with, you know. So I think that the more we face as adults, and however hard it is for us, we need to be mindful that it's so much more harder for the younger people, for adolescents and for children.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Everyone has children.
Yeah, my boys have come home and they've said they've had open conversations with their colleagues, non-Muslim colleagues, about what's going on, and my boys have been pretty clear-cut about. They've actually explained that this is actually not the teaching of our religion. It goes against the teaching of our religion, and this is in actual fact wrong. And I think education from home, you know, having these kind of conversations with your children is so important, so that the children can then go and, you know, spread that information or whatever you teach them to other children if they are confronted with a situation like this. So yeah, I think education is key, and my children, they are being, you know, questioned about things like this, but I don't want them to feel insecure about it. I don't want them to feel like they're being threatened. I want them to speak up, and, you know, with the right information and with conviction.
Do you feel as a community we could do more, as in the Muslim community we should be doing more?
I think
maybe we should be in
women.
the schools. Maybe we should be in the schools educating people, you know, visible hijabi women.
I think
they're educating.
One major step forward now, well, for me, I was really proud when I heard this, is that Shia Islam is going to be taught in schools now as a separate, like when you learn about Islam, there's going to be specific modules that you learn about Shia Islam. So I think for us that is really important, because I think we are the driving force of being peaceful and being mindful of, you know, the different people around us, and you know, just generally being respectful. So I think that is one thing that is going to be really, you know, improving the situation, hopefully.
But when you mentioned the Shia Islam thing, you could say we had this argument after school. Actually, they'll say there's certain parts in the world where you have Shia militia that are very prevalent, and the outside world don't look at them favourably either. So just because we are not associated with that group, that terror group that's doing crazy stuff at the moment, but I think there's a major difference between Shia and militia that are, say, for example, defensive, and these terrorist groups that go into other countries and other communities and destroy. People don't see it that way. I think in the West, if you're not doing things a certain way, then there is, you're a rebel, you're defending yourself. It's all the kind of blood, the same thing.
It must be really confusing for an outsider to kind of
differentiate.
It's confusing for us, let alone. I think it's confusing for everybody to get their heads around the fact that when we're talking about the importance of unity and oneness, how do we, by understanding our differences, we can actually come together and perhaps know that, you know, it's not necessary. I think it's bringing to what you were saying, Sarah, continuing from the fact that you do get, or Ruby, you were mentioning about the, you know, you might get extremists on both sides, as much as you get moderate, and those, you know, you sometimes can sit and have a conversation with someone of another sect, another religion, or none, and actually agree on things, because it's more a matter of principles that you share as like very human core values that actually will connect us, and that's what we need. That's where those teachings, if you're having in the school saying, well, this is what Shia Islam encourages, and this is what, and you'll come to see, oh, there's not much difference really. They're quite saying the same thing, and it strengthens that the message that actually deep down there's beauty in our differences, and that we can we can actually embrace and actually celebrate that.
I think with my own son's experience, we haven't, alhamdulillah, experienced any Islamophobia, and we were talking earlier, the things that I was hearing was quite shocking for myself, but I think with him, I think he just feels that he always has to justify himself, and he doesn't want to. And he feels that he has to justify himself, not with non-Muslims, but with Muslims.
Yeah.
Almost you have to align yourself to what masjid you go to. And this is to people who aren't Shia. You know, why are you different? And he's just fed up of having the conversation. The only time that it's personally affected us is when we go to the airport and he happens to have a very long Arab name, which is like, and you're going to, you know, America, and you go quite a lot. And
so would you say, like, now we're having the religious institutions, that actually there needs to be, say we have the khutbah and a Jum'ah, you know, and there needs to be a lot more educating at that time. So, for example, through the khutbah, being able to talk about these current issues and how we do respond to Islamophobia in a manner that is actually Islamic. So, there's an importance, I think, in having that guidance, rather than just kind of just mentioning hadith. But actually, I think sometimes it's about, you know, we're talking about politics, being really aware of our surroundings and what's happening in the world is very, very much part of Islam, that we can't separate that in a sense, because we have to know how we went to kind of live, like it's a way of life, and what are we meant to do in response, how are we meant to live balanced in a world, in a society that's so much encouraging. It's completely the opposite of balance.
I don't know how you guys feel about it, but my experience has been that a lot of community centres and mosques act like they're deer in headlights. They're very slow to pick up on things. They're not very reactive. They're almost looking at it if somebody else is going to do it. And I think part of it is the shock, because my local mosque is a Sunni mosque, and they're so immersed in the community anyway, which happens to be very European and, you know, very Anglo-Saxon, that they don't feel that they need to explain themselves. They have an open day, the schools come and visit. So when there's an attack by this crazy group, they're like, well, what do we do? I'm a bit shocked. I don't know how more accommodating I can be, because you've been here, we're very vocal on need. But with other centres, it's almost like, well, they're very slow on, they're quick to send out a statement that this is not us because we're Shia. But there's no practical guidelines.
Well, I was in the high street in Slough literally a few days ago, and there was a stall out there with brothers, Muslim brothers. I don't know what background they were from, but they had lots of leaflets that they were distributing, and they had banners. They had banners to say that Islam is not terrorism. And I think personally, I think that's brilliant, because people are approaching them. People are seeing, and they have whatever questions they may have. They can speak to these brothers, and these brothers will clarify that actually this is not what Islam teaches. This, whatever you're seeing, whatever media is portraying, is absolutely wrong. This is the reality of it all. And I personally think that's a fantastic way to do it. You know, to let the public know what reality is.
Well, as much as there's people, like you mentioned, as much as there are people who don't want you to. Don't want to hear anymore, because they're just shut off. They've already made up their mind that, oh God, what are these people preaching on our streets? Get them off before they've even kind of even given you a chance to speak or to represent, or to, you know, to explain anything, because they're just already made up in their mind that you're, you know, you're a problem and get off our streets kind of attitude. But there are the majority. That's not the majority. So we must remember that actually, as much as there's so much fear on every side, that everybody's encountering fear, that's what divides us. But when it comes to the rules of loving one another, it's actually about having being able to listen to actually hear, like, give each other chances as well, and like to explain things.
I mean,
and talk,
a while ago, a couple of years ago, I had at the high street, this is Walthamstow, and there was a Muslim brother who was arguing with a Christian lady, and I was absolutely angered by what he was saying to her. He was saying to her that, oh, they disagreed on something, and he goes, I'm going to see you in hell.
That
She
kind
goes,
of
who
attitude.
are you to decide? She was like, who are you to decide that? And I actually intervened. And he goes to me, oh sister, why are you taking her side? You should be taking my side. And I said, it's about wrong and right. First of all, how dare you say that she's going to be in hell? Who are you to say that, first of all? How are you to know what's going to happen in her?
He doesn't know where he's going to be, let alone what she's going to do.
Exactly. And he was shocked that I was opposing him and supporting her. But it's not about, you know, the Muslim and Christianity. It's about what is right at the end of the day.
I think that's why it's so important important that we know our history. And when I say history, I don't mean going back to the countries that our parents came from or our grandparents came from. It's about, on a global level, what have we contributed on all levels, scientifically, arithmetic, blah, blah, blah. And to have that confidence, so when we have our children, we build that in. That's part of who they are. So it's not my name is and I am Muslim. It's a whole package. It's
I'm a British Muslim now, which means that before anything you prioritise your Britishness before your religion, and I find that in its own sense. What does it mean? Like Sarah, we spoke earlier about British values. I mean, what does that mean? Like, you ask a non-Muslim what that means, they'll just be, I don't know, I mean, really, what is that? What's British values? I mean, human values, surely we should be focusing on. What does it mean?
I don't know.
What does it mean
to be moderate?
Extremist?
I just think
liberal, extremist as in like right,
centre. No, extremist for me. If you say someone's extremist, it means that they stick to their religion and like
their interpretation.
Yeah,
their interpretation. Yeah.
But
so almost orthodox. Yeah. Almost orthodox. So just as you would have orthodox Jewish people, that a lot of them are traditionally Eastern European, and the way they dress is from the era of the Eastern European. You wouldn't call them, a fundamentalist. You would call them orthodox. So I don't like these, as you said, the labels. I don't know what moderate is, because you're moderate and I'm moderate. What does that mean?
Yeah. We could argue forever on labels. I think labels are very, they're distracting. They distract us. They take us away from focusing on the core of what the issue is. We've got to get to the root of what is Islam, how is Islamophobia becoming, how is it that it's become, again, such a norm for us to accept that this is now our current sort of environment, that we need to just sort of bite our lips and just sort of get on.
What would you classify as being Islamophobic? Is it somebody that disagrees or doesn't like your way of life? Because this is a discussion that I was having with a Jewish counterpart of mine. I said, if I say something that might be challenging for you, it's very easy for you to call me anti-Semitic, and I'm not. I would never disrespect anybody. But if I say, well, this part of your culture or this part of your religion I don't agree with because there's some discrepancies, and I'm comparing it to other religions, I'm quickly called I'm being anti-Semitic. Yeah. Or if I say that, if anything happens, you're always quick to say people are being anti-Semitic, then you label me as being, someone who doesn't like Jewish people. So my question is, if somebody says something about our religion that might be challenging, they might just say, look, I don't like the fact that there's so many immigrants here. Are we going to become like other groups and take that as,
No, it's when those disagreements when those disagreements are, expressed through violence and anger. We can agree to disagree and get on with it. I mean, as Muslim communities, we have so many divisions amongst ourselves. Fine, you agree to disagree and you get on with it. But unfortunately, when it's then, expressed with anger and violence and hatred and animosity, terms,
even words are not acceptable to you.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
And do you think there's a togetherness? Are we really united because of what's happened? Are we united as an ummah because of everything that's happened?
Well, we know that the problem roots to the fact that we have a divide that has been kind of fed through politics, as in politics divides us. But the fact is, we know that there were times where there were no issues like in Iraq. I think you had, didn't you? Like marriages between
there were
Sunni and Shia.
Real unity. Like there was no differentiating even between non-Muslims. It was a really mixed society, but. It's unfortunately
that's
not like that anymore.
Media portrayed it.
No, even in my father's time when he was growing up, he said his neighbours used to be a Jewish family, and they used to get involved with like Ashura and everything because it was like a community thing rather than a religious, It wouldn't be like, oh, you're Shia, I'm not going to get involved with you.
So we know it's not the sects that encourage divide, it's actually the political
agendas and
all
the
To be honest,
tensions. And
I don't know, I hear this point of view and I don't 100% agree with it, but I see where it's coming from. That rather than just kind of going on about uniting and that we all should be one and blah, blah, which we should, ideally, right now in the political, all the troubles that are happening, shouldn't we be a bit more clearer about what is dividing us? Like that there is a country that is getting funded and that is fueling the terrorism. There are a group of people that adhere to this, mentality that only they deserve heaven and only, so shouldn't we be clear that, we're not actually united. Why should we be united? We don't want to unite with people that are that narrow-minded and, that self-righteous and just
wouldn't want us anyway.
Yeah,
because we're different.
We are the targets of their terrorism just as much as non-Muslims. I think it really helps when we say that, we understand how you're feeling because we feel it too.
But do you think
rather than saying no, we're one?
Because I think this happens. I think this happens a lot with Muslim communities. I have to say, whatever ethnic background, but when something goes wrong, we really get upset about it, but we don't unite, and that's one thing I like about other groups, that they're quick to gel together, mobilise, gel together, make their voices heard. We're too busy about saying what continent are you from, where do you live, what car do you drive, and this is what I think we don't allow people to say what they want to say.
But then
it's got these gaps, huge gaps.
I mean, where's this coming from? That's what the root is. Again, the more we are connected with, and just knowing what we're here for, we would respect others more. We wouldn't be so judgmental because we can gain from whoever we even meet, even if they might not be with the same share, they might have a completely different view, different religion, everything, but you still learn something.
We're meant to be mirrors for each other.
Exactly.
Ideally.
I mean, the reality is beyond label. There is we're all human and we all aspire we want to have that peace, but we don't know. Not everybody will trust in God, Allah, to actually trust in that oneness, to actually get closer to that. Obviously, in this dunya we'll never have complete peace, but we have a kind of satisfaction that we're actually serving a purpose. When you're serving a purpose, you have that inside. You feel that there's actually nothing you're doing is in vain, and everything you're doing is actually is for a greater good, and so it's becoming the delegate of Allah. How do you do that? By becoming His the attribute, actually being the attributes. How do you do that? Like kind, generous,
integration, maybe.
But this is it. When how much more
are we going to integrate?
I don't know.
But integration, I don't know what that. These are just words that were played on: democracy, integration,
integration is when you can
mixing with others.
You know what? I think when we compare, for example, Holland, where I think it's called a pillar society or something, because they actually don't integrate, communities just.
Where in Holland?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Not in Amsterdam.
No. There's pockets of people where they don't. It's just the people that have emigrated and they kind of
everywhere could be.
Yeah, but for example,
of places.
In London, just because I live here and it's what I know. I don't know, people keep saying integration, you have to get involved more, how much more? We're in every single university, every single job, we are an active part of the society, we serve like everybody else, What else
even
is
do that?
required
Because
of us?
I know there's certain parts of Southall and Wembley that there's generations of people who don't speak English and they've been living here for 25 years. But there hasn't been a problem while they've been here. Even Greek Cypriots, I know my friend's grandparents have been living here. They've never spoken a word of English, but nobody said to them they needed to integrate.
Yeah.
But then nothing happened. They were living in their areas and there was no problem.
Islamophobia exists. It's increasing that the people who are wanting to push blame in England, for specifically to why we. When it comes to the economy, when it comes to when it comes to security, national security. They're very, I think, very much convinced that and accepting of the fact that there should be tightened security, especially when it comes to monitoring Muslims. And I think that's quite worrying, because you're already being categorised as guilty before being proven innocent, purely because you are Muslim. Islamophobia is a form of racism, and so the root, how we're supposed to deal with this is, I think we can't ignore it. We can't just pretend that, okay, there's racists and we need to just tolerate it. Actually, yes, there are racists, but we need to challenge the laws, because if there are laws in place that are kind of giving way to giving permission for, say, when you go to an airport and they can interrogate you purely because you're Muslim. This is Islamophobia, racism that needs, it shouldn't be tolerated. It's unacceptable. Yet we are accepting this form of hate. We're accepting it as okay, it's security, and we need to understand, because there are people in the name of our religion committing crimes. But no, why?
What do you say, Sophie?
I think to some extent, from a security point of view, something that I did think about quite a bit, and for me, I think to some extent, because of the series of events that have taken place, it is understandable, I feel. As to how much they do it and how often they do it and how extreme it is, that I'm not sure of. But I can understand why they would do that.
We're understanding it because we're now because of the narrative that's being fed to us. We're actually seeing that it's a bigger thing than it is. I don't think the majority of Muslims are actually a threat. It's you see, it could be.
As long as we understand, as long as we understand that it's not a link, that what these terrorist attacks aren't. They're not Islamic. It's non-Islamic. This is non-Islamic behaviour. So if somebody is being pinned because they look like a Muslim and they're being checked for that reason, then it's unfortunately the two have been linked. But obviously we know in our minds that these two are not linked. But there are some idiots out there that in the name of Islam,
but that's not
carrying out
necessarily
horrendous
fair,
acts.
because most of the people that are carrying out these acts, I'm going to say a majority of them are males, and males don't wear hijab, and they're not easily, you're not necessarily going to be targeted. They're going to presume you're from a certain place in the world. Are we going to start targeting all Somalians or Indian people, and everyone's...
there'll be no end to it, and they may as well just check every Muslim through the security barriers then, do you know what I mean?
You're just guilty. If you're married to a terrorist, then you deserve it. That's what the attitude is, right?
Someone said, I remember I was watching the news, and one of the neighbours was commenting that they had no idea that this person living next door to them was extremist. And that how come their family and their community didn't know, because that, as if we have, meetings and we talk about...
People don't know what their children are doing in their bedrooms, playing on a video game. Are they really? People say the most craziest things that to them at the time makes a lot of sense, but who knows what someone's really doing, and that's just sitting right in front of them. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I really do look forward to seeing you next time on Ladies First. Do take care. Assalamu alaikum.